If you've tried everything for better sleep, magnesium supplements, weighted blankets, cutting off caffeine by noon, even those melatonin gummies that never quite seem to work, and you're still lying awake at midnight, staring at the ceiling, there's a good chance the answer isn't in a bottle at all. It might be growing in a garden bed or along a fence line, or even in a patch of what you've been calling weeds for years. 12 magnesium-rich greens, most of them almost never eaten, that quietly support the body's ability to properly relax at night. Magnesium plays a foundational role in how the nervous system winds down once the day is over. It's involved in regulating neurotransmitters that calm brain activity, and it helps muscles release tension instead of holding on to it hour after hour. Some research has pointed to magnesium's connection with the body's natural production of melatonin, and with GABA, the calming signal that tells an overactive mind it's finally safe to rest. Many diets today fall short on this mineral, not because food doesn't contain it, but because the foods that contain it most, leafy greens, rarely make it onto the plate in any meaningful amount. A slice of bread, a bowl of white rice, a fast dinner eaten standing at the counter, none of it carries what a simple handful of greens does. These 12 are some of the richest sources in the plant world, and yet most of them stay ignored. In gardens, along trail edges, even growing wild in backyards nobody looks at twice. Spinach is the green most people already know contains magnesium, and for good reason. A single cooked cup carries roughly 150 milligrams, a substantial share of what the body needs in a day. Its tender leaves have long been valued for iron too, but magnesium is where spinach quietly earns its place on this list, especially when eaten in the evening, cooked down and folded into a warm dish rather than left raw in a salad, where much of that mineral content simply passes through unused. Swiss chard carries a similar magnesium load, sometimes even higher than spinach depending on the soil it grows in. Its broad, ribbed leaves and colorful stems make it one of the most visually striking greens in any garden, yet it rarely gets planted outside of specialty beds. Traditionally, chard has been simmered slowly, allowing its magnesium and other minerals to soften into broths and stews, the kind of dish grandmothers once kept warm on the back of a stove all evening. Beet greens are the part of the beet plant almost everyone throws away without a second thought. The root gets roasted, pickled, or juiced, and the leafy top ends up in the compost, even though it carries more magnesium than the root itself. Deep green, slightly earthy, and quick to wilt down when cooked, beet greens have quietly fed households through generations who wasted nothing that came out of the garden. Stinging nettle sounds like the last plant anyone would want on their plate, and that reputation is exactly why most people never eat it. Once cooked, its sting disappears completely, and what's left is one of the most magnesium-dense greens in the temperate world. For centuries, nettle has been steeped into teas taken in the evening, associated with a settled, relaxed feeling that made it a quiet staple in traditional herbal practice, long before anyone understood exactly why it worked. Lamb's quarters grows in vacant lots, garden edges, and cracks in sidewalks, and most people pull it out without a second glance. It's a shame, because this wild green carries a magnesium content that rivals spinach, sometimes surpassing it, along with a mild, almost nutty flavor once it's sautéed with a little garlic and oil. Foragers have prized it for generations, calling it one of the most generous wild foods a backyard can offer, while gardeners still treat it as a weed to remove on site. Purslane has a similar story. A low, succulent little plant that spreads across warm soil and gets yanked from vegetable beds without anyone realizing what they're discarding. Its thick, juicy leaves hold a notable amount of magnesium, along with a texture that softens beautifully in a light sauté, or holds a pleasant crunch when left raw. In parts of the Mediterranean, purslane has long been added to salads and stews, valued exactly for the quiet, grounding quality it seems to bring to a meal, and for how easily it thrives where other greens simply give up. Dandelion greens are perhaps the most overlooked plant on any suburban lawn. Mowed down without thought, treated as an enemy of a tidy yard, these jagged, slightly bitter leaves carry meaningful amounts of magnesium alongside a long tradition of use in teas and tonics. Older folk practices leaned on dandelion greens, lightly steamed or brewed, as an evening ritual, something to sip slowly while the body eased into rest. and the day's noise finally settled. Amaranth greens come from the same plant that produces the well-known grain, but the leaves themselves rarely make it to a plate outside certain traditional kitchens. Deep red or green, tender when young, these leaves carry a magnesium content that stands up against any cultivated green on this list. Cooked leaf for cooked leaf. Amaranth greens have been simmered into soups for generations, prized for their mineral density long before anyone ever measured it in a lab. Malabar spinach isn't a true spinach at all, but a climbing vine with thick, glossy leaves that thrives in heat where regular spinach would wilt and fail within days. Its leaves carry a strong magnesium presence, along with a mild, slightly peppery taste once cooked down in a hot pan. In warmer climates, it has quietly filled the role spinach plays elsewhere, feeding households through seasons when nothing else in the leafy green family would survive the heat. Watercress grows directly in flowing water, which alone keeps most home gardeners from ever attempting it. That's likely why it stays absent from so many plates, despite carrying a magnesium content that easily competes with any leafy green grown in ordinary soil. Its sharp, peppery bite has made it a favorite in certain traditional soups, added right at the end of cooking to preserve both flavor and mineral content before the heat has a chance to break it down. Mustard greens bring a bold, spicy edge that some find too intense for a regular salad, which may explain why they're more often grown than actually eaten. Beneath that sharp flavor sits a green, genuinely rich in magnesium, softened considerably once it's braised or simmered slowly with a little onion and broth. Traditional Southern cooking has leaned on mustard greens for generations, often prepared low and slow until the sharpness fades into something warm, mellow, and deeply comforting. Collard greens close out this list, a green so associated with long, slow cooking that few people realize how much magnesium actually survives the process. Sturdy, deep green leaves that hold their structure even after an hour on the stove, collards have fed families through generations exactly because they store well, grow easily, and deliver steady mineral content meal after meal, season after season. If plants like these, quietly working in the background of health, most people never think about, are the kind of thing you want to keep learning, subscribe. There's a new one every week. Getting the magnesium from these greens depends heavily on how they're prepared. Raw leaves are wonderful in a salad, but heat actually helps release magnesium bound inside plant cell walls, making it easier for the body to access once it's eaten. A light sauté in a little oil, just until the leaves wilt and turn a deeper shade of green, tends to preserve both flavor and mineral content without breaking either down completely. Steaming works well too, especially for tougher greens like collards or mustard greens that need a bit more time to soften into something pleasant to chew. Teas made from dried nettle or dandelion leaves, steeped for 5 to 10 minutes in hot water, offer a gentler way to take in these minerals in the evening without needing to cook a full meal after a long day. Soups and broths are perhaps the most forgiving method of all. Simmering greens slowly draws minerals into the liquid itself, so even if some magnesium is lost from the leaf, very little actually leaves the pot. Pairing any of these greens with a small source of healthy fat, like a drizzle of olive oil, also seems to help the body absorb what it's working so hard to offer. This is only the first seed of what this garden holds. Subscribe and grow with us. Growing most of these greens at home is simpler than the grocery store price tag might suggest. Spinach, chard, beet greens, mustard greens, and collards all prefer cool weather, doing best when planted in early spring or early fall, in soil kept consistently moist, and enriched with compost. Seeds go in about ½ an inch deep, spaced roughly 6 inches apart, and most varieties are ready for a first harvest within 30 to 60 days, sometimes sooner for young, tender leaves. Dandelion and lamb's quarters barely need planting at all. Once established, they tend to reseed themselves year after year, showing up reliably in the same corner of a yard or garden bed without being asked twice. Nettle prefers a slightly shadier, moister spot, often along a fence line or the edge of a wooded area, and once it's rooted, it spreads readily on its own with almost no attention. Purslane and amaranth thrive in the opposite conditions entirely, full sun and warm, even dry soil, making them ideal for the hottest stretch of summer when cooler greens tend to bolt and turn bitter. Malabar spinach needs something to climb, a trellis or fence about 6 feet tall, and rewards that support with steady leaves through the hottest, most humid months of the year. Watercress is the outlier here, needing a shallow container of consistently moving or refreshed water rather than traditional garden soil. But for anyone with the setup, it grows remarkably fast, often ready to harvest again within just a few weeks. A layer of compost worked into the soil before planting goes a long way for nearly all 12 of these greens, since richer soil tends to produce richer mineral content in the leaf itself. 12 greens, some familiar, most forgotten, all carrying a mineral the body relies on to properly wind down at night. None of them promise a miracle, and none of them replace good sleep habits built over time, patiently, night after night. But for anyone willing to add a handful of dandelion greens to a soup, or let a patch of lamb's quarters grow instead of pulling it, or steep a quiet cup of nettle tea before bed, these plants offer something worth trying. Small, steady, and rooted in generations of quiet, practical use. Sometimes the answer isn't found in something new and expensive. Sometimes it's already growing, right outside the door, waiting patiently to finally be noticed.